I've worked at a small gas station in what I consider a middle of nowhere town for quite a few years now. I used to work the day shift, but I decided that I would take the pay increase and lose my social life and work the overnight shift instead. Not like I had much of a social life to lose, but to be honest, I've been married for about 10 years now, and we don't exactly go out to parties or hang out with our friends or anything. Thankfully, my wife doesn't mind that I work the overnight shift, and we've made it work between the two of us. Honestly, the job has been incredibly uneventful for the years that I've worked it, with very little exception. Obviously, this is an event that is an exception. One important thing to note about this station is that we are, mostly, a 24/7 station, with a 1-hour exception each night for us to count down the drawer and do the receipt drop in the back. Basically, we close the store for 1 hour to mark the end of the business day for the business and pull the numbers. They used to not close to do it, but there was one point where the store was actually robbed by a former employee during the count because he knew the time that it was done, and the door was unlocked, so he took advantage of it. Ever since then, they've made it to where the store is closed for 1 hour every night. It's a weird system, but it does work in the end. On this night, I had closed down the store at 3 a.m., as I was scheduled to do, and I had counted down the drawer first and then did the receipt print for the card transactions. I had actually gotten it down to about 40 minutes, so I had 20 minutes until I needed to reopen, and I decided that I would go ahead and just take a few moments to myself behind the counter. Kind of like a power nap sort of thing. Not really sleeping, but just dozing off for the full 20 minutes. A couple seconds after I had sat and closed my eyes, I started hearing what sounded like a banging noise. It was enough to pull me from my light nap and make me jump. I looked around at the doors, and there was a woman that was smacking one of the doors and pulling on it as hard as she could. At first, I instinctively started saying, "We're closed until 4. I can't unlock the door until then." But as I started talking, I could tell by the way that she was frantically pulling at the door and staring at me that something was seriously wrong. Since I'd already counted down the drawer, I figured that I could let her in and at least see what the hell was going on. I walked around the counter and unlocked the door and asked what I could help her with. She told me that her car had broken down a few blocks down the road and that she was trying to get here so that she could have someone pick her up since she wasn't from around the area. But then said that for the last block or two, there was somebody that was following her. Now, this was definitely a creepy story, but I was a bit skeptical at first. It almost felt like one of those stories that you would tell to scam someone, or to get them to let their guard down. I actually asked her what she wanted me to do about it, and she said that she just wanted to come inside to call her husband so that he could come and get her. After a few moments of her reiterating things, and me feeling like she was probably telling the truth, I decided to just let her in and lock the door. I told her that we weren't technically open, so I couldn't have her anywhere in the store other than right there. She said that she understood, and that she would stay at the front door, and apologized for the whole thing, saying that she didn't mean to be a bother. She was just really scared about what the guy that was following her was planning on doing. At this point, I felt like she was leaning too heavily into the story to actually be lying to me. So I told her that it wasn't a bother and mentioned that if she sees him, that I would go ahead and call the cops for her. After a few moments of her talking on her phone to whom I'm assuming was her husband, and then her waiting and just staring out the front door, she started making a bit of small talk, which was fine. I still had a couple moments before I could reopen, so I kind of welcomed the conversation. No sooner than when we started just talking about whatever, I heard another loud sound. But this time, it wasn't just a person smacking the glass. It was the sound of something smashing the glass on the side door. Thankfully, the door was designed so that smashing it would not allow access, as the glass was reinforced, wasn't very wide, and there were 4 metal bars across it. But this guy was seriously doing everything he could to smash the glass so that he could get in. Like, he was pretty clear in what he was trying to do. The woman screamed. I kind of yelped like, "Whoa, what the hell?" and turned to look at the scene in front of me. After realizing what was happening, it occurred to me to hit the panic button. I know you're not supposed to hit them until the robber leaves in order to prevent a hostage situation, but I knew that he wasn't going to be able to get into the store with what he was doing. I'm sure that this whole thing played out in like 10 seconds, but it felt like forever. Just standing there, watching this guy rapidly smash the glass in the door and trying his hardest to get into the station. All the while, the woman is screaming that this is the guy that was following her. I'm yelling at her to get behind the counter and trying to figure out what the hell I could do. I guess the guy finally realized that he wasn't going to get in, and he just kind of stood there staring at the two of us with this horrible grin. Like, you could see the malice just pouring out of this dude, and he kept pointing at the two of us and shaking his head. It was terrifying. At no point did he say a word. He just stared, smiled, pointed, and shook his head back and forth, which honestly felt more threatening than if he had been screaming at us. Finally, I started hearing the sirens as the officers started to pull into the lot, and this guy took off behind the building and out of sight. A couple of officers took off after him, and another one came to the door to check on us. I went over and opened it, and, well, that was a fun time, explaining to him and the owner when he showed up what the hell had gone down. The woman explained her side, I told my side. It was pretty much the same story, honestly. She had no idea who this guy really was, and I obviously didn't know him. This was just some dude that was an absolute psycho and had ill intentions with this poor woman. The officers waited for her husband to show up to come and get her, and I ended up having a long night with them and the owner going over everything, and going through the footage on the cameras. The owner wasn't too happy that I let her in during our closed hour, but I straight told him that if I hadn't, this guy would have gotten to her, and that would have been a lot worse than a bit of property damage. Thankfully, this was the most eventful situation that I've ever had on this job, and I hope that it stays that way. I don't know if they ended up catching the guy or if he got away from them that night, but I never saw him after that, nor did I ever see her. I was definitely a bit nervous to go back the next day, but it was just normal operations after that. I did have to explain to a few of our regulars what happened to the door, which got old, but it is what it is. So, to that lady, I hope that you're doing okay and that this didn't traumatize you too much. And to that guy, I hope that you and I never meet again. You absolute psycho.